Renaming files and creating disk images are a couple of the tasks we do on the desktop every day with our computers. Let me show you how Automator can make it easier for you. I'm going to create an Automator workflow that allows me to create a disk image from a group of selected documents here on the desktop. We're going to launch Automator, which is the little robot icon in the Applications folder. And Automator is our automation utility that ships with macOS 10. By default, you'll get a starting points window in the workflow window. And this is to help guide you through the process of creating a workflow. Our workflow needs to take files and items that are on the desktop and make a disk image from them. So what we're going to look for and search for is an Automator action for creating a disk image. If we select this Automator action and drag it into our workflow, you'll see the action view for this particular action called New Disk Image. And this action will create a new disk image based upon the items that are passed to it, or an empty disk image based upon a certain size that you have indicated. So the selected items in the desktop will be passed to this workflow automatically once we save it, so I don't need to identify them in my workflow and instead need to focus on this particular action. We're going to create a disk image that will be sized to fit whatever the items are that will be passed to it, and we're going to leave it on the desktop, and once it's created we're going to leave it mounted and return the image volume as a reference to the next Automator action in the workflow. For the second action in the workflow, we'll choose to have the Finder open up that newly created volume so we can view the contents. And I drag that action in after the first action in our workflow. And I'll just leave it the way it is. So now we have a workflow that has two Automator actions in it. The first will create a new disk image. The second will then open the disk image for us to view and edit. Now we'll save our workflow. Under the File menu, choose Save as Plugin. In the drop-down sheet, you'll see that there are numerous ways that we can save this particular workflow to be used throughout the operating system. You could save it as part of the script menu and launch it from the script menu. You could save it as part of a print workflow so that it would appear on the Save as PDF menu in the print dialog. You could save it as an image capture action that processes images that are extracted from a camera. You could save it as an iCal alarm so that it runs at a particular time or day. You could save it as a folder action that responds to items dragged into a particular folder. But in this case, we're going to save it as the last item here as part of the Finder's contextual menu. And we're going to call it New Disk Image. That's simple. Choose Save, and then we'll close the Automator workflow window. Here in the desktop, to execute the workflow, I merely need to select a group of items that I want to create with a disk image, hold down the Control key to bring up the Finder's contextual menu, and choose More, Automator, New Disk Image. And you'll see at the top menu bar that the workflow will start to run, and it will give you a progress indicator. So a new disk image was created on the desktop. It's been opened, and you can see that it contains the items I had selected. I can then name the disk image anything that I want, or adjust the view of the disk image, or rename some of the items, or organize them in any way that I want. But now, creating a new disk image is just simply a single action, a single menu selection. Let's look at another desktop task that is very common to all of us, is renaming files. So I have a folder here of some images I took on a vacation. And you can see that these files are named the typical kind of name that a camera generates. It's a series of numbers. It doesn't really mean anything to me. It's not very descriptive. So I'd like to rename these files with something that's more pertinent to what the files actually are. To do that, we're going to select all of these, hold down the Control key, click on it and hold. Down at the bottom, I'm going to choose Automator, Create Workflow. And it will open up a new workflow window with an action called Get Specified Finder Items, populated with all the image files that I had selected. The purpose of this action is just to identify certain sets of files or folders and to pass those references on to the next action. So I'm looking for an action that will rename those items. So I'll type in rename, and sure enough, there is an action called rename finder items. And I'll drag that in after the first action to add it to the workflow. Now when I do, Automator has sensed that I'm about to do some changes to files in the desktop that can't be undone. Namely, I'm going to retitle these particular image files. And it's asking me if I'd like to add a copy process or a duplication process before I rename the files. In this particular case, I know what I'm doing, so I'm going to choose Don't Add. And a rename finder items action will be placed into the workflow after the get specified finders. So the results of the first action get passed to this, and then from there I can choose the various naming options that I want, like changing the case, adding text, searching and replacing for characters in the name, or making sequential name, which is what I'm looking for. But instead of doing it here in the workflow, I'd like to save this workflow as a tool that I could reuse over and over again right from the desktop. So I'm going to click the Options gel here at the bottom of the second action, and it will reveal a checkbox called Show this action when the workflow runs. I'm going to select that and then save my workflow again as a plugin to the Finder and call it Rename Finder Items. Now I can close that, and when I want to rename some items in the Finder, I merely select the items I want to rename, hold down the Control key to bring up the contextual menu, choose Automator, Rename Finder Items, and then the action view containing the rename parameters will appear. I could say I'd like these all to have a single name called Vacation, and I'd like to start the numbering at 1 and place the numbers after it. You could have them before as well, and you could see here in the example that it will show you what it will look like, but I'll make them after, separated by a dash, and make all of the numbers 3 digits long. So there are my parameters. I click Continue, and all of the files are instantly renamed with the parameters that I want. So now I've created a renaming utility that's available right on the desktop. I can give it to staff and co-workers or friends and have them use it as well. So there's a couple examples of using Automator on the desktop to make your life more productive. Thank you.